am I a pessimist or an optimist? I'm an optimist. Well, interesting. Am I an optimist? I heard a very interesting discussion, a reported discussion, where one of the Rolling Stones asked a professor from Princeton, a guy called Cornel West, if he was pessimistic or optimistic about the future. And this guy is some communicator. For those that know Tony Campolo, this is like a black Tony Campolo, if you could imagine such a thing. He said, the terms pessimism and optimism mean nothing to me. I am a prisoner of hope. Wow. Wow. You want to be a prisoner of hope? Well, interesting enough, 12 months ago, Phil Hanlon was standing here, and I would commend the podcast to you that is on the big website, and he was talking about health, physical and psychological health in this area. And he was relating research in terms of people whose self-esteem and meaninglessness had really resulted in severe depression. And it was the word, especially there was a big project in Finland, and it was the word hopelessness. How many people do not have a hope? So the prospect, if you want it, having a hope, which is not a hope that's going to happen, this is solidity of being a prisoner of hope, is not a bad place to start. Being a prisoner of hope. So there's action that you can take, and then the results. We go to the results. Now, in business terms, the business people here will want to know, how can I measure this? And well, I can say with great confidence, because of the evidence, if what I've been talking about is actually put into practice in the workplace, you'll see the big five improve. Profitability, productivity, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, and even safety. So then, when people can measure something, they're interested. But from your point of view, perhaps the passion, the happiness is a byproduct of that. Not as a goal on its own, but to actually be in a place where your talents are being exercised and fulfilled. There's a very interesting book called Design for Life by Arthur Miller, not the well-known Arthur Miller, but another Arthur Miller. And his whole philosophy was based on the uniqueness and the value of each person. And he said, right, how do I know? How do I get to where you're telling me about? And I would suggest there are 3 levels of situations in the workplace. You meet people and you say, well, what is it about your employment? It's a job. I die a little bit when I hear somebody saying what they do, it's a job. But I also recognize for a lot of people, that is the reality of life. The economic necessity, they have to get a job. The next level up from it's a job is a career. And many of you will have grasped careers and developed your careers. But there's a higher level than that. And that is the level of your calling. What is your calling? Which does not change when you reach a certain age. And they introduced this word called retirement, which I don't like because it got tired right in the middle of it. Right, what is your calling? And Arthur Miller maintained that you discover your calling. When you find, you wait for it, I could say, well, I'll come back and tell you next month. No, I tell you what, you can discover your calling in 2 areas. One, discover something that you really love doing, and, a very important and, that other people say that you're good at. Now, I love singing, but nobody has suggested that I give up my day job, if this is my day job. Anyway, the point is, because of our uniqueness, 3 trillion cells throughout the body, that's a lot of cells, and each one of you are different. Until you were 42 days into your mother's womb, you didn't have a brain cell. You were literally thick as 2 short planks. Day 43, 1 brain cell emerged. You know that you were born with 100 billion brain cells? That's 9,000 a second growing for the rest of the pregnancy. So if somebody says, oh, don't eat or drink that because you might lose 10,000 brain cells, say, well, what's 100 billion? You've got a lot of you is there. It's awesome. And perhaps we have lost a sense of awe. A friend of mine was talking the other day about what we need to get is aspiration. You know, we get very excited when we impressed by fireworks. And then they stay up there for a few seconds and then they're gone. And if it happened to be in one of these lovely nights that occasionally happens and there is no clouds and everything else went off and you looked up to the universe, that is awesome. You start measuring the distances there and finding out the size of the universe, which is just, scientists are just beginning to grasp the size of it. So you've got this massive universe, but you've got this awesome individual, the child, the face of a child. How come, have you ever seen a child born cynical? You know? We teach them well. So it is about the uniqueness and the value of each person. We don't have a lot of time to talk of the detail today. And I'm going to, since Leslie's here, I'm going to pinch one of her stories to close on, because it for me has been one of the most inspirational stories about. And I also give Leslie a plug for her second book, which is called With What Remains, which you can buy. Anyway, okay, we're not going to cover, we're not flogging things. But anyway, when I read, Leslie kindly sent me the galley copy of the book before it was published. And the title was With What Remains. And it's always interesting, a choice of title. Her first book was called The Colour of Darkness, which was written just within 2 years of the genocide in Rwanda. And it was a very powerful name, The Colour of Darkness. But With What Remains, Leslie discovered, and a few of us subsequently chased after the story, that there's a violinist called Itzhak Perlman. Some of you perhaps would have heard of Itzhak Perlman. If you've not and you saw Schindler's List, he was the person who played the haunting violin music. Itzhak Perlman is 62. He was a child prodigy, being a wonderful violinist. At the age of 4, he contracted polio. Now, you don't see these days. I can remember being at school with people on calipers and polio. It is devastating illness, and he still suffers from it today. He still has these calipers. But he went on and to be an extraordinary, gifted, talented musician. Anyway, 12 years ago, I think it was, in a concert hall in New York, he was the soloist. Now, it's quite dramatic seeing Itzhak Perlman coming onto the stage to do a solo act, because he has to drag himself across the stage. He has to sit down, click his legs in, and then start playing the violin. 3,000 people in the audience waiting to hear the maestro. He was playing, it was for 6 minutes, 30 seconds into the piece, they heard this bing, and everybody knew that one of the strings, one of the 4 strings had gone. And there was the orchestra stopped, there was a stunned silence. But Itzhak Perlman, he ushered the conductor to continue. And he played the rest of that 6-minute piece on 3 strings. Now, I can't play the violin. I can only but guess what it must be like to reconfigure an incredibly difficult piece, instead of on 4 strings, on 3 strings. And by the end of it, sweat were running off him. There was an amazing performance that he'd just given. And the stunned silence that followed was followed by an absolute uproar, including the orchestra were banging their instruments and people were screaming and shouting. And he ushered for the microphone to be brought across to him. And there he was sitting, and he said, and he repeated twice, he said, "My life has been about making music with what remains." My life is about making music with what remains. And in the context of Leslie's book, Leslie experienced that people in Rwanda today, there are many, many people who've come through unbelievable traumas, but are making music with what remains. How to